Hello, I'm Scott Spires, author of the new novel Abandon All Hope, and you're listening to the Lake Forest Podcast.
Welcome to the Lake Forest Podcast, the podcast about the lovely city of Lake Forest, featuring topics like local news, sports, music, people, and food. My name is Pete, and I also live in Lake Forest. Hey, we have a show sponsor, NeuroNoodle. Hey, parents of athletes, your kids get a physical every year, right? Well, include a brain map so you have a baseline to compare it to in case something happens. It takes only 20 minutes to get the data you need to know if your athlete should get back on the field. Schedule an appointment now at neuronoodle.com. One of the things we like to do here at the Lake Forest Podcast is put a spotlight on local people doing great things. And we're joined today by Scott Spires, the author of the book, Abandon All Hope. Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Scott, before we get into the book, could you give a little background on yourself? Where are you from? How'd you get started, etc.?
Well, that's actually a very complicated question. My father was a career Army officer, and due to his posting at the U.S. Embassy in New Delhi, I was born in India. So I was born halfway around the world from where I am now. We also lived in Argentina. We've lived in different parts of the United States, New Orleans, Kansas, Indiana. But I have lived more of my life in the Chicago area than anywhere else. And as an adult, I lived in foreign countries as well, in Great Britain, the Czech Republic, and most recently in Russia for several years.
Wow. How's that trip up to Agra? Did I pronounce that right? Agra? To see the
in India, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I went back to India for the first time since being born there in 2008. I have no memories of childhood there because we left when I was about 1 year old, but I did manage to make it back in 2008, and yes, I did visit the Taj Mahal. So I made the trip.
That's an interesting road, huh?
All I remember is that I had a driver, so I didn't have to experience the road directly.
Close your eyes. It's they use horns for sonar. No,
anyway,
Scott.
It was quite fascinating.
Yeah. No, Scott, you got a heck of a background. Now, are you in the Lake Bluff, Lake Forest area? Where do you live now?
I live in Lake Bluff.
Okay.
So we're right close to Lake Bluff downtown and about a 12-minute walk from the lake.
Got it. Yeah, we just had Matt Nielsen on from the Rib Fest. You guys, October 2nd, you're going to be cooking some ribs out there. So might be seeing you out there soon, Scott.
Well, they're going to be cooking. I might be eating.
And it's all free. So Scott, when did you become a writer? Is this your first book? Do you have other books? Please give us some info.
I've been writing in some form or other since I was very young, like in elementary school, writing stories and so forth. As an adult, I've got a fairly extensive publication record, but it covers a lot of territory. Because I've done journalism, I've published a few short stories, I've published academic articles, and I've had some rather eccentric writing jobs too. For example, I was the beer correspondent for the Prague Business Journal when I was living in Prague. It's a now defunct business newspaper, but they needed somebody to cover the Czech beer industry. So I got that job, which was a lot of fun. I've written about a variety of topics, including for the Chicago Reader. I wrote an article on New Urbanism some years back. I used to write for the New York Press, which is another alternative paper that I think no longer exists. And I've done various sort of writing jobs, but this book that is just now coming out, Abandon All Hope, is my first published novel.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about it. What was your inspiration? What made you decide? Tell us about the book. Just not even the cliff notes, just what our whistle on it, Scott, to make us want to go out and pick it up.
Well, I actually started writing this book many years ago when I was living in Prague and no longer writing about beer. This goes back to 2002. And I was reflecting on the fact that I'd had various jobs, office jobs, temporary jobs, and I had enough material there to get an interesting and somewhat comic novel out of it. So I started writing it. And then I found myself at an impasse after I'd written about half the novel. I had my characters, I had a lot of episodes, but I had nothing to bind them together. And as a result, I put it aside and I didn't come back to it until the summer of 2019, when I finally figured out what the plot was going to be and what my main themes were going to be. And I completed it early in 2020.
Now, tell me, do you have an agent? Like, tell me about the book writing process. So you put everything together. Somebody's got to edit it and then promote it. How does that process work?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because if you do not have an agent, and I don't have an agent, it is almost impossible to get your book published by a well-known publisher, at least, because of the way the publishing world works nowadays. There are, I think, 4 or maybe 5 conglomerates which pretty much control major league publishing nowadays, and there is no way they're going to look at your novel if you don't have an agent. Therefore, I was restricted to small presses and niche publishers. And thankfully, there are a lot of those, but even they have their restrictions. They'll say things like, we only look at unsolicited manuscripts during the months of March, May, and July, or you can only submit if you pay a fee, which is usually not very large, but still, it is a bit of an obstacle for some people. Or if you buy one of our books, or you can only be considered for publication if you submit as part of a contest that we're holding. In other words, we only publish contest winners. So I had to negotiate all of this. And what kept me going was that the rejections that I got were very positive. Essentially, they would say things like, hey, this book is really compelling and the characters are well developed, but unfortunately, we only publish 3 books a year, so we can't take you on right now. And so while it's frustrating to get rejections, it is part of the writing life. Anyone who's been a writer, anyone who's tried to get a book published, even with an agent, knows that you've got to pile up the rejections first before you have any shot at success. And this can go on for a long time. Then finally, in March of this year, it was accepted by Auctus Publishers, which is a small press based in the Philadelphia area.
Oh, good for you. So people say, how'd you become an overnight success? Well, it took me 10 years.
Yeah, that's basically the idea. You've got to be persistent. You've got to not let it get you down, not let it get you depressed, and you have to do your homework. You have to know what kind of material the press likes to publish that you're submitting to. You have to pay attention to these rules. You have to make sure you get all the formatting correct, because you have to look at this from the point of view of an editor at one of these presses. Let's say you're an editor. That means every day, books, manuscripts from authors you've never heard of are popping into your inbox. You might go for lunch, come back an hour later, and there's 6 more manuscripts in your inbox that need to be dealt with. So you're going to be looking at ways to eliminate books right up front. And if there's a typo, if they haven't followed the formatting rules, anything at all, your book is going to be rejected just based on that before they even look at it. Many rejections are done of books without even looking at them.
Now getting back to your book, Abandon All Hope, there's some comedy, satire, maybe even dry humor in there. Could you give us just a quick? You have a couple main characters in there covering both sides of the work environment. At least that what I see in the summary now. Please just give us a little. Tell us about the characters in it.
Well, I came at it this way. I thought it would be interesting to take two characters who are from roughly the same background, but are following contrasting and opposite approaches to life. So I even gave them similar names to indicate their similar background. One is Eric, the other is Evan. They have four-letter names that start with the letter E. Eric is a realist to the point of being a cynic. He's hedonistic. He works because he has to. He hates his job. He indulges in his hobbies, and he doesn't have really much in terms of expectations out of life. Evan, by contrast, is a very idealistic young guy who is trying to make a mark on society, trying to make himself important in the process. So the incidents, the conflict is all generated from that.
Got it. No, I can't wait to get more into it, Scott. You've also won. You're pretty accomplished. You're downselling yourself here. Tell us about some of the prizes that you've been up for. Second place.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you're referring to the terrain.org
right.
competition.
Yep.
Okay, this is actually important for the eventual publication of the book. And I'll tell you why after I give you the details here.
Sure.
So in 2016, terrain.org held a short story competition. And they do this, I think, more or less every year. Terrain.org is an online publication which deals with the built and natural environment. It's sort of environmental in its focus, has some things in common with new urbanism, which is an interest of mine. And I submitted a short story to them, and I was the finalist, which means the de facto second prize winner, beating out 59 other competitors. And this is also important because the sort of people that Terrain attracts as authors are already professionally published authors who've won prizes and had books published. So this put the idea in my mind, hey, if I can almost win this competition, if I can win second prize at least, why don't I go back to that novel that I started but didn't finish and try to finish it? So that's what I did.
Oh, that's awesome. So for the young writers out there, Scott, besides persistence, do you have any advice you could give out there, some of the Northwestern kids that are listening to our show?
Well, all I can tell them really is my own formula for success and what worked for me, because I realized that for different people, they will have different formulae. And in addition to the advice that I gave regarding approaching publishers, I would say that a couple of things that worked for me while I was writing this book. One, it was the old write what you know advice. And in this case, there was a lot of personal experience going into it, experience with work, experience with different kinds of environments. And here's the thing, though, also, not just my experience, but experience of other people contributed to this. Of course, it is all modified, it is all blended together to create something new. But it was the write what you know, what you have, what you can feel, what you have strong images of, what you feel a strong attachment to, that is more likely to create a compelling piece of writing. Another thing that I was thinking in the course of writing it was, okay, let me back up here a bit, just
Sure.
for a second. I've been in a lot of writers groups, and I found that while they can be helpful, they can also hurt your writing. And from my perspective, one of the things that was hurting writing in these groups was what you might call the plausibility rule, meaning someone will read an incident or a character or something taking place in a story, and they will say, oh, that's not plausible. That would not happen in real life, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result, the story is then revised to make it more plausible, but in the process, more mundane, and I think less memorable. So I was guided by the belief that memorability is more important than plausibility. So you should create memorable characters, incidents, and events, even if they stretch the bounds of what might be realistic, just because it is more entertaining and it's more likely to hold the reader.
Especially an editor that's going to lunch and reading a couple sentences of your manuscript, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, if they start reading the manuscript and it's just like the other 120 manuscripts that they got this week, it's not going to stand out, and they're going to throw it away for that reason.
You got to have tough skin, right, Scott?
You definitely do. And another thing I recall from these writers groups I was in, we would get people who wanted to write, or they had some vague idea about writing. Yeah, I want to write a novel, a memoir, or whatever. And they would put their writing forward, and it would be criticized, and they just couldn't take it. And well, my thinking about this is, if you cannot take criticism, you shouldn't be a writer. Being a writer is exposing yourself to criticism by its very nature. You've got to develop the right mental attitude here. There's constructive criticism, there's destructive criticism. You have to be able to distinguish between the two and apply what is actually useful to your own work without getting offended unnecessarily.
Right. Well, Scott, they never really ever erected a statue for a critic.
More than one person has said that, and I think it's funny, but it is also, criticism is necessary, and all these phenomena, it comes in good, bad, useful, not useful, misleading, destructive, constructive varieties. There's, because as a writer, if you want to get better, you cannot sit in your bubble, and you will not necessarily be your own best critic. There's another thing I've learned from experience. No matter how many times you went over your manuscript and think you fixed everything, somebody is always going to point something out that you didn't catch.
There's always a fact checker out there. Trust me, even on podcasts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You need the fact checkers. You need the attentive and helpful critics.
Right. Scott, what's the best way to learn more about your book? Is it auctuspublishers.com? Did I say that right?
That is correct. Auctus, AUCTUS, is the name of the publisher. But the other thing, if you want to learn more about the book and about myself,
yeah, right.
Go to my website and blog,
okay,
which is at SW Spires. That's SWSPIRES.weebly.com. It's called Lakefront Linguist.
Lakefront Linguist, got it.
Yeah, because my day job is translation.
And what are you translating?
I specialize in legal, general business, and professional services. I translate Russian and German into English. There's actually a strong Chicago connection here, because I got started doing this when I was working at the Moscow office of Baker & McKenzie, the law firm.
Yeah.
One of the biggest law firms in the world, and it's based in Chicago at the Prudential Building. So that's how I got into legal translation. And when we moved back to the US in 2012, I went freelance and have continued with that. Yeah, probably.
Scott, the great book. I wonder if they'll ever do a little movie on it, and we can say, hey, we saw it here first, Scott.
Well, let me say right now that I think the book would be great to adapt into a movie because it includes a lot of action, a lot of comedy, and some colorful characters that would be fun to play. So the screenplay practically writes itself.
We got to send this over to Netflix or Prime, huh?
Or somebody like that.
Yeah. You going to get an agent for that?
I haven't explored that yet. I mean, I'm thinking first, let the thing come out. If there's anything more that I want to do with it, I mean, I would hate to try to negotiate my own further deals without knowing what I was doing. So yeah, at some point, if it's a success of any kind and I want to continue doing this, then I'll probably have to get an agent.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show.
I was glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, we're going to bring you back. We're going to say, hey, remember we talked about that movie, Scott?
Oh,
and
there is, before the movie comes out, and who knows when that might be.
Yeah.
I just want to call your attention to the fact that I'm holding an event at the Lake Bluff Library.
Oh, yes.
Yes, on October 12th, which is a Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And it's called The Late Blooming Novelist. And in it, I will tell you how to negotiate the world of publication if you don't have an agent, using examples, my own example as well as that of those of other people, and also talking a bit about my novel. And there will be copies there that you can buy. And
oh, nice.
If you're the sort of person who's always thought I've wanted to write a novel, but I don't know what to do with it when I finally finish the manuscript, it will be exactly for you. And it's taking place October 12th, as I said, at the Lake Bluff Library, and they want you to register first. So just go to the library's website if you're interested, and sign up.
I'll put the link in the podcast notes. I'm glad you brought that up. That's awesome. Well, Scott, again, thanks. This is great. I'm excited for you, and get that hand loosened up for all the signatures.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Yeah, it was terrific being on your show.
Scott, we're definitely gonna do it again. I'm gonna put all your contact info in there, and let's not be strangers, okay?
Definitely, I agree with you. Oh, and I just want to say also, publication week is this week. The book it will be available this week. I'm not sure what day yet, but the publisher has told me it will be out this week.
Okay. Scott, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Thanks for listening to the Lake Forest Podcast. Please give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and smash that like button on Facebook, Instagram, and follow us on Twitter. Let us know what you'd like to hear about any upcoming shows. Again, I'm Pete, and I can be reached at pete@lakeforestpodcast.com. The link will be in the podcast notes below. On behalf of my co-host, Scu Walker, we thank you for listening, and we thank our Patreon supporters, Church of the Holy Spirit and Reverend Luke Beck. Cue the band.